Where's Martha?
Non, ça c'est costume. Puis les ça après je ouais. C'est la directrice. Ouais.
Ouais. Je pratique là depuis des années.
Moi aussi. On est tous amateurs qu'on va se voir. Vous allez à quel studio?
Je me promène entre Saint-Laurent et maintenant Griffintown.
En Griffintown, il est bien. Moi j'aime ça. Le Griffintown aussi, il est bien. Je suis allée où il y avait de la musique, un peu du house. Ils ont fait un mix entre du house, puis du moksha yoga, puis c'était vraiment
Ouais, des fois ils font des petits événements, mais moi je me voyage dans différentes villes, je vais beaucoup à New York au moksha yoga, ici à Toronto aussi. Là c'était moksha, mais ils ont changé pour yoga. C'est tous des anciens de Saint-Laurent.
Est-ce que vous connaissez un studio à Ottawa? Il y a quelque chose de différent de moksha? Parce que j'ai cherché, j'habite à Ottawa, j'ai cherché quelque chose de différent. Moi je fais un budget à Montréal. Il y a vraiment il n'y a pas grand raison.
Non.
Mais merci, j'apprécie, je vais le transmettre. Moi je m'occupais des autres sponsors, c'est elle qui a décidé de HR
à Dina?
Ouais, à mon jeune. Je vais avoir le certificat.
Non, c'est bon.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second act of TEDxMcGill's Giving Voice today. We are going to start the second act with a performance from Hal Marino and Mo Clark. Marino, originally from Mexico, has been in Montreal for the past 5 years and brought his range of musical talent with him. He is a multi-instrumentalist, an arranger, a composer, and an educator, loves world rhythms and classical singing, and he's incredible. He'll be performing today with Mo Clark, who is a Métis multidisciplinary artist, who you might better know as Mistress of the Looping Pedal. She has 2 albums, a bilingual book of poetry, and multiple videos and performance awards. But today, we get to listen to both of them in person. So let's put our hands together for Mo Clark and Hal Marino.
Tanse. Quick.
Let me do the crickets.
This is Marino's excellent move, the cricket move. Tanse natsiga sanmo ekwa kamama askimiosit esqueo. Nito tsino tosquanik maganiwigan Montrealic. I'm originally from At the Elbow, Calgary, Southern Alberta, Treaty 7, but I've been in Montreal now for almost a decade.
Hi, I'm How Marino from Mexico. I'm not Mo, I'm Marino.
We're Mo-Reno, okay.
Morino, let's live there.
So I was asked just over a week ago to participate in this event. It's an honor to be here on the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk people of the Flint in Tiohtià:ke, the meeting place that has been one for many, many years. I'm Métis. I come from many different lines, and one of those lines is the line of music and of voice and of singing. And thinking about today, we decided we would start off our set with improvisation. We've both been singing and improvising pretty much since we came out of the womb. Everyone arrives into this world making sound, and that is an improvisation of what are our needs, where are we at. We've been giving voice to our bodies, our spirits, our minds, and our beings since we could move our... And so that's what we're going to do today. So we have not charted this journey that you're about to take with us. Wild journeys. All the Way In is one of the master vocal improvisation trainings that we've both been a part of in various realms with a woman named Rhiannon, and I really owe a lot of my vocal improv repertoire and acknowledgement to her, who studied a lot with Bobby McFerrin and was part of Live, and she works a lot in voice estras and improvisation. So giving voice comes from, for us, using our bodies as the site for connection, for creation, and for communication. And a lot of that comes from the creative capacity to build kinship. And some of that kinship comes from other performers and artists, and some of that kinship comes from other forces, such as the Northern Lights, or the tricksters, or the coyotes. And I was part of a performance called Making Treaty 7, which includes Calgary, Mikonsis, and Blackfoot, and the 5 First Nations communities that surround Calgary. And I was invited to be a part of the show as a way to artistically present the treaty-making process and to re-examine the original spirit and intent of treaty that was signed between the Indigenous and the non-Indigenous, between the Blackfoot, the Sarsi, the Nakota, the Blood, and the Kainai people, and the Crown, representatives of the Crown. And so as a Métis person, we weren't necessarily there at the signing of treaty, but we were always hunting and trapping and being nomadic on many of those same lands. And so I performed in the first year, and I performed a piece, and midway through the piece, I quote Louis Riel. "My people will sleep for 100 years, and when they awake, it will be the artists that give them their spirits back." For me, this quote had a lot of meaning because I wasn't necessarily raised acknowledging and honoring and speaking that I am Métis. And so this process for me was a way to also go back and to trace the land, the places that my relatives passed through, where they would have set up camp, where they would have hunted, where they would have been making, you know, their wapus stew, rabbit stew. And the second year I got asked to go back, I wasn't allowed to perform this piece because there was land claim struggles between the Métis and one of the other nations presented in the piece. And so all of a sudden, as an adult woman who has finally found a sense of belonging in my story, who has finally felt like giving voice has been heard, is now being censored. And so I was quite devastated by this. And I'm in just north of Calgary at a friend's place one day, and I had just gotten off the phone with one of my elders, Nodaki Kijek, Bob Smoker, and I was pretty upset. And it was night. And I looked out of the window right before turning off the lights, and I saw the Northern Lights outside. And I stepped outside, and it was so black outside, I couldn't even see my hands in front of my body. And I looked up at those Northern Lights, who we call our ancestors, and I asked them for guidance. And as I was looking, and as I was asking, and as I was connecting, the coyotes started to yip and howl. And this was the piece that came from it. Coyote came upon the turtle's back. In a dream I was sleeping so deeply like my people for at least 100 years. Wrapped tight around his throat, a coarse iron rope muzzled his nose, and in his eyes a stone cold silence. Why the violence? fire from my lips burn away the iron wires. May the water from my eyes wash away the scars. May the wind in my belly clear away the ash. And may the earth in my heart wake up the spirit path. I loosened the rope from around Coyote's throat. He opened his mouth wide, no more did he hide the beads burning holes in his tongue. And through the holes I gazed awake in dreams. A stream of neon green spilled out in solar flames. Grandmothers, ancient and alive, arrived to light their messenger fires. Carriers of creation seeping through the cosmic cracks. Their circle feast called me back. Break your stillness, my child. Be true to your spirit. Be wild and take the beats. Beat so red, red like blood pulsing through me. Beat so blue, blue like rivers renewing memory. So with courage as my guide, I took the beats from Coyote's tongue. Stories left unspoken sear the root until they're sung. May the fire from my lips burn away the iron wire. And may the water from my eyes wash away the scars. May the wind in my belly clear away the ash. And may the earth in my heart wake up the spirit path. As a mother with her child, she's always taught to sing. So with the earth, my mother, we began to string a song. As grasses grow, as waters flow, some beings carry no name, no name. We are their keepers, we must protect them like the land. They're not ours to claim. Coyote circled round me, his howling sounds resounding like all that came before. My body opened like a doorway to the night, and I began to rise up in spirit and in choice, suspended anti-gravity with roots reaching from my voice to where the silence dwells deep beneath me. Seeds glimmered as they listened, and rising a wild rose glistened, pale pink in prairie grasses. Medicines mend the inside so the violence can pass us by. May we be bigger than the shadow, for we're all constellations, not just some consolation prize. And in the gifts of kinship we thrive, we survive, we're alive. May the fire from my lips burn away the iron wire. And may the water from my eyes wash away the scars. May the wind in my belly clear away the ash. And may the earth in my heart wake up the spirit path. May the earth in my heart wake up the spirit path. Coyote came upon the turtle's back. In a dream I was sleeping so deeply like my people, and now we're waking up. Thank you, Kinanatskumte. This last piece we're going to share is called Newo Atoskayaganak, and I want to give a shout out to Joseph Natauhau and Cheryl Rundell, who are two elders and artists that we collectively write songs together in Nehiawewin as a way of reclaiming the language that was taken and that I wasn't able to learn as a child growing up. And this song we actually got to perform in Kujarapik in Wapmakstu in the very far north. I took this fine Mexican man who's from Cancun. And we lived up in Chisasabi, which is the last community in EUSG reachable by road. And then after 5 weeks there, of merino falling in the sinkholes of snow, we went even further north, and we got the pleasure to share our gifts with 2 communities. And so we found ourselves in a gymnasium of the school with all of the high school students from this entire community, the Inuk and the Cree students. And it wasn't until later that we found out that these students in these communities hadn't really been getting along. They live in the same community, but they're 2 different nations. They hadn't really been communicating and getting along very well. And we were able to get them round dancing together. And in Nehiawewin, Pachichawin is what we say for round dance, which means the spirit moves between. So there was something weaving between these students when they all got up and they all danced in a circle together to this song. And this song is written inspired by the prophecies of where we're at today. And it calls us all to come together and to share our stories, to share what we have, to love and to be compassionate with one another, to celebrate what is life, and to always persevere, to keep practicing, and to never give up. We're only going to perform 2 cycles of it because we've got to get off the stage.
Wow, what an incredible performance. That was amazing. It is my pleasure to introduce our very next speaker. She is another member of the McGill community, so some of you may have heard of her. Dr. Doina Prekup is currently one of the co-directors of the Resources and Learning Lab, at the School for Computer Science at McGill University. And in all of her spare time, she is also a research team lead at DeepMind Montreal. Today, she's going to be talking to us about how computers learn and why these advances in technology are giving voice to the future. So, without further ado, another round of applause for Dr. Blair Foucault.
It's a great pleasure to be here and tell you a little bit about what I do, which is artificial intelligence. So my story is that I grew up in Romania back in the days when it was a communist country, so things were pretty dreary. And as a result, being rebellious teenagers, we did very radical things like watching pirated sci-fi movies, because there wasn't very much else radical to do. And so I grew up looking at androids like Data and at robots, and I thought, this is really cool. I would really like to build something like that. So it really inspired me to actually go and study computer science at university. And one of the first sort of significant assignments that I had there was to build a program that could play chess. Now, chess is a game that people consider a hallmark of intelligence, so I thought, okay, this is pretty good. We're going to actually make some steps here to build some robots. And then I read the details of my assignment. And these details said, well, think about how you play chess and then take those rules and program them. Now, it turns out I'm really a lousy chess player, so all I could do is basically tell the program some very, very basic things about how the pieces move. It wasn't really very good. Now, I decided to not give up, and so I went to grad school. And at the beginning of my grad school, actually, a watershed moment for artificial intelligence happened. This is a picture that was in the news at the time. This is Garry Kasparov, who was the world chess champion, being beaten by a computer. And the computer was called Deep Blue. It was a creation of IBM. And really, all of us who were studying AI were very inspired by this. We thought, okay, now this is true intelligence. Computer is better than a person. A game that we would really consider to be very significant. And so, very enthusiastically, we went and we read the papers that described the technology. And then we realized that actually this was an amazing feat, but it was essentially a human feat. There was a computer that was purpose-built to play chess. That's all it could do. It was really, really good at playing chess. But it was very special and couldn't do much of anything else. Also, people sort of thought very carefully about how masters played the game, and they built this capability into the computer. So it was amazing, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. Now, here we are, 20 years later, and actually things have moved quite a bit. So these are some pictures taken from the games of Lee Sedol and KG, who played also a computer program, this time at the game of Go. Now, Go is an ancient game that is considered significantly harder than chess. It involves strategy as well as tactics. And it is sort of considerably more difficult also because there's many, many, many possible moves, and people have to think at various levels. How do I capture territory? How do I defend? And so on. And it turns out that this program called AlphaGo and its sort of next version called AlphaZero actually was really, really good, to the point that it is now essentially the world's best Go player. And it made the cover of Nature, and a lot of us got very excited about it. And we now have, in fact, a much more interesting way of doing this kind of sort of feat, which is not so much engineering. So this is what I want to tell you about. How do these programs actually play the game? It turns out that they're not so much programmed as they learn how to do it. Now, when you think about learning, kids learning, one of the things that comes to mind is going to school, okay? So if you go to school, you have a teacher, the teacher tells you various things, you kind of ingest them, and then you learn how to do stuff. That's one way to do learning in computers. It's called supervised learning. So you can have, for example, a computer that wants to learn how to label images. How do we do this? Well, we show the computer a lot of images where somebody has gone in and actually labeled the things that are interesting. So in this case, we want the computer to learn how to label faces, and so somebody's gone in the image and drawn some little squares around the faces. And now we're going to show this information to the computer. The image is just a set of pixels, and we know what we're looking for in the image, and so now we can show the computer lots and lots and lots of images, millions of images as it turns out, and it will learn how to recognize faces. Now, what does the computer have inside? It has a little brain. It's called an artificial neural network or a deep network. It's in the picture over there. It really has some very small units that can do very simple things, okay, like compute a certain line function, or maybe like a little squiggly line function. So each of these is very, very simple, kind of like a human neuron. The power comes from the connections. The connections have numbers on them, and these numbers get trained. Some of them get high, some of them get low. And each of these little units, that's a very specialized kind of thing. So for example, some of them are going to just simply learn to recognize edges or lines in the image. Some of them are going to actually recognize certain kinds of faces. Turns out some of these neurons actually learn how to recognize cats, okay? Why? Well, because a lot of the images on the internet are cats and dogs and so on. And so we now have these wonderful artificial brains that are really, really good at recognizing cats from all angles and all different breeds. So this is interesting. This is part of the way how AlphaGo does things, in fact. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Initially, AlphaGo was trained by looking at a lot of games that people play, good sort of grandmaster level players, and essentially thinking the move that they did was the right move. Okay, and so the program learns how to reproduce these moves. Now, this is great, it's very interesting, it's a very powerful program, but there's one catch here, which is this requires a lot of data that is provided by people. Okay? With the images, we need millions of images labeled by people. Now, people get bored very quickly of this kind of task. And in some cases, like in the game of Go, there actually aren't that many games that are played by grandmasters that we can look at for information. So now if we think back at how people learn, yes, you learn things in school, but actually you learn tons of stuff even before you go to school. You learn how to recognize objects and what colors are, and you learn to count, and you learn to interact with the world in various ways. And so that's the kind of process we would like to mimic in a computer. It's a different kind of learning called reinforcement learning. And it turns out that this is not even just something that people do, but animals do it. It's very widespread in the natural world. And so in one picture there, you have a little mouse that's learning a task. The task is essentially to press a sequence of levers in order to get some food. And the mouse just kind of does things at random, stumbles upon the levers. When it gets the right levers, it gets the food, and that's its reward. Okay, that feels good. So now the mouse is happy, and that reward kind of triggers a path of learning that makes it remember what were these things I did that led me to the reward. It turns out we can train computers in much the same way through reinforcement learning. So you think of the computer program now as being exposed to the world. It watches the world. It can do things. It's allowed to experiment. And as a result of what it does, it may receive a reward. Now this could be a positive reward, a number, and it could be a negative number. And the goal of the computer is to find actions that essentially give it as large a number as possible. That's a bias that we put in. But it's never told the actual thing that it should do. It's allowed to experiment. The other interesting thing is that these numbers might come much later than when the action has happened. Okay? For those of you who are going to university, you probably expect some reward at the end of the day when you get your degree. Okay? But it's going to take some years to get there. And so rewards can be very delayed, yet somehow they still reinforce our actions. So that's in fact how AlphaGo learns. It looks at the board, it tries something, does some actions. There's no feedback until the end of the game. At the end of the game, it observes whether it's won the game or it's lost the game. And if it's won the game, it's going to make all of the actions that happened during that game a little bit more likely, because they obviously led to a good outcome. And if the game was lost, all of those actions are going to become a little bit less likely. So that's the basic principle. And now the program is just going to sit there in its happy computer corner and just play millions and millions of games by itself. It turns out that this leads the best program in the world, Not only that, but because the program is not really told what's the right thing to do, because it learns by experimentation, it can in fact invent new ways of playing that are different from what people believe. So this is a graph that's showing AlphaGo 0 learning. Okay, performance is high, the higher the better. So this is its rating. And after 3 days, it actually surpasses the ability of AlphaGo Lee. This is the version that beat Lee Sedol, that was trained much by supervised learning. And then after 21 days, it actually reaches the level of master, which is the one that defeated Kiji. And at the end of the training, after 40 days, it becomes so good that it beats the previous version 100 games to nothing. So it's absolutely the best Go player in the world. What else is interesting about this program is that now there's no special purpose hardware. Okay, it runs on a regular computer. And the algorithm is actually very general. There's nothing in the algorithm that we told the computer that is specific to the game of Go. We just told it, you should prefer to win. And now go off and just play lots of games and figure it out. So that's a very powerful concept because it generalizes to many, many different situations. Now, of course, I'm very happy with games, and many of us computer scientists are very happy with games. But there's actually real applications to this. And so in our lab, we look at all kinds of ways that artificial intelligence and these kinds of learning methods can be applied. One of these pictured here is a project we have going on at the Children's Hospital, which is looking at very premature babies. So in this case, the babies are born, they're very small, they cannot breathe on their own, and so they're hooked up to a ventilator. And now we would like to figure out when are they actually ready to be taken off of that ventilator machine. And that's a decision that's typically done by a doctor, but the doctor needs help because actually they're not always there to observe the baby, and so they have limited amount of information. And also there's a lot of noise. There's a clinical setting, the babies get picked up and put down, the sensors lose contact and so on. So what we do is we gather data in the hospital setting, and now we want a computer to essentially predict the risk that the baby would incur if it were to be extubated right now. And in this case, the computer is not actually experimenting with taking actions. It's simply learning to predict the right outcome, and it's being rewarded for predicting the right outcome. There's another application that I'll show you here, which is we have some data, it's image data. It's very corrupted. I'm not sure if you can tell what's in this image. Okay, it's a little bit hard to tell. But if I let the computer do its job, okay, you see some digits appearing in the image. Now, this is a task that's called fixing corrupting data, or data imputation in statistical terms. It's a problem where you have to look at the data that's there in order to kind of guess at what's not there. And people are good at this when a little bit of data is missing, but they're not so good at it when a lot of data is missing. And you can kind of see that it's going to be hard for you to recognize these images and to kind of fill in the gaps without any help. So what the computer does is it looks at the image, it looks at the context of what's missing, and it can decide to fill in a pixel or not. And it kind of does this over time, little by little, and again, it's rewarded by obtaining at the end the right answer. But once it's trained, it can do this on any other kinds of images. So in the context of this presentation of giving voice, I think it's really important for us to think of how we're going to use these very powerful tools now in our lives. They are available. Some of you probably use them every day. If you interact with your phone, you talk to your phone does some voice recognition. If you do translation, Google Translate, you're going to interact with these kinds of methods. How are we going to make use of this so that this technology can actually help us improve? And I hope that all of you can think of some useful ways of doing it. Thank you.
Up next, Thank you so much, Dr. Pruitt, for sharing your story and all of your research. And up next, I would like to introduce Philippe Meunier. Let's say a big bonjour, because he is going to be giving his speech today en français. Philippe Meunier is the co-founder and chief creative officer at Sid Lee. He is also a board member at the One Club for Creativity and the co-founder and chairman at Factory. Amongst all of these creative places that he works, he is one of the most well-known innovators in creativity in Quebec and in Canada. So today he is going to be talking with us about how one can amplify their creative voice. Bienvenue!
Is it working? Yes? Okay, thank you. Are you guys a bit sleepy? No? Are you sure? Oh, I'll have to say thank you to TEDx because it's, I was amazed this afternoon to see the program, all different people from different fields, a lot of learning, a lot of experience, and a lot of knowledge, so I'm really pleased to be here. But today I'm not going to talk about science or data or babies, but I'm going to talk about ideas. And this is what I do every day. I play with ideas. And, okay, I'm going to try to work that ticker. Yes, so I play with ideas because I work with people from different backgrounds. Actually, I'm speaking in English right now. I'm supposed to speak in French. Okay, je vais changer en français. À tous les jours, je travaille toujours avec plein de gens de différentes professions. Et ces gens-là, leur but, c'est de trouver des idées. Mais ces idées-là, souvent, ce sont des idées qui vont vivre dans le futur. C'est pas des idées qui prennent naissance maintenant. Lorsqu'on travaille, par exemple, en data ou en sciences, ce sont des idées qui, tranquillement, pas vite, avec le travail de tout le monde, puissent prendre une ampleur et vivre dans le futur. Nous, toutes les choses qu'on fait, ça vit dans le futur. Pour moi, les créatifs, ce sont les gens qui bâtissent le futur. Qui, dans la salle, croit que vous êtes des créatifs? Levez la main, ceux que vous vous sentez créatifs. Pas plus que ça? Oh. Oui, 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 yes, you're one. Moi, je peux vous dire que vous êtes tous des créatifs. Le problème que vous avez, c'est que vous ne savez pas comment amplifier votre voix créative. Donc aujourd'hui, ce que je vais vous donner 4 trucs pour amplifier votre voix créative. Parce que souvent, les idées, c'est des choses qui sont fragiles, souvent c'est difficile d'avoir des idées. Puis souvent, lorsqu'on a une idée, on veut la garder. On la laisse dans nos petits calepins. On la garde près de nous, parce que c'est comme un nouveau bébé. On ne veut pas donner l'idée, parce que si on donne l'idée à quelqu'un, ben, il va peut-être faire de l'argent avec. Ou peut-être qu'il va la changer, la décorer, puis finalement, on ne l'aimera plus l'idée. Mais au contraire, les idées, il faut les partager. Souvent, j'ai remarqué aujourd'hui en sciences, lorsque les gens ont des idées, on les partage. Et les idées deviennent réalité parce que la collectivité a fait en sorte que l'effort commun fait en sorte que l'idée arrive, l'innovation arrive. Parfois, les idées, il faut être capable de les prendre et de les amplifier. Donc, la première chose qu'il faut se dire lorsqu'il faut amplifier une idée, c'est le contexte. Prenez votre idée et posez-vous la question, dans quel contexte ça va vivre? Souvent, les gens, lorsqu'ils ont l'idée, ils sont tous fiers. Mais ils ne peuvent pas se dire exactement dans le futur où l'idée va prendre naissance. Par exemple, les gens qui ont créé Facebook. Les gens qui créent Facebook, la majeure partie des gens, ce sont des programmeurs, mais il y a aussi des UX designers. Ces gens-là, souvent, se posent la question, dans quel contexte les gens vont utiliser mon logiciel? Dans quel contexte que les gens vont pouvoir interfacer avec l'information? Mais tout ça est dans un contexte. Si, par exemple, vous faites quelque chose, vous avez une idée, et l'idée va prendre naissance aux Jeux olympiques en 2020, ou si votre idée va prendre demain matin lorsqu'il va pleuvoir, l'idée change complètement. Posez-vous la question à toutes les fois que vous avez une idée, dans quel contexte cette idée-là va vivre? Comment les gens vont la percevoir? Est-ce que cette idée-là va être pertinente dans le contexte? Souvent, lorsqu'on a des idées, on ne se pose pas ces questions-là. Si vous avez un petit calepin de notes en quelque part, it has to be highly contextual. Si une idée n'est pas pertinente dans un moment, l'idée va mourir. Moi, souvent, je trouve qu'on a des fausses bonnes idées. Souvent, on pense qu'on a une bonne idée, et puis on travaille dessus, on met de l'argent, on met de l'énergie, puis en bout de ligne, on s'aperçoit que l'idée n'est pas bonne. Mais souvent, c'est parce que ce n'est pas dans le contexte. Fait qu'une bonne idée, souvent, va prendre toute sa pertinence dans le contexte. Mon deuxième point, c'est la culture. Les idées, souvent, naissent de la culture. Souvent, les gens se nourrissent leur processus de création par la culture. Et puis par la suite, ces idées-là retournent dans la culture. Ces idées-là forment la culture. Si demain matin, notre société explose, et puis on est des archéologues, puis on cherche qu'est-ce qui se passe après 20 ans de guerre nucléaire, on sort des artefacts de publicité, de panneaux, d'emballage de produits, on réalise qu'on a un portrait de la culture. Donc souvent, ce qu'on fait, nos idées doivent se coller à la culture. Lorsqu'on a créé la campagne d'Adidas pour célébrer les 50 ans de l'originalité d'Adidas, on est allé chercher une vieille chanson de 1950 et puis on l'a ramené à la saveur d'aujourd'hui. Faire en sorte que nos idées sont portées par la culture, sont amplifiées par la culture. À toutes les fois qu'on a une bonne idée, colisez un petit peu de culture alentour, vous allez voir l'amplification de cette idée-là. Très rapidement, les gens vont s'apprendre, vont l'appartenir. Il y a quelques années, on avait fait une campagne pour les Toronto Raptors, l'équipe de basketball. Souvent, les gens n'avaient pas l'impression de faire partie de cette équipe-là. On est arrivé seulement qu'avec un petit slogan, « We the North ». Et les gens ont tellement adhéré par la culture à cette campagne-là que rapidement, les gens se sont fait des drapeaux, se sont tatoués ça sur leur corps, ils prenaient du masking tape, faisaient des banderoles partout sur la rue. Ça, c'est lorsque la culture prend l'idée. Sinon, l'idée va tomber puis va mourir. Fait qu'encore là, assurez-vous que l'idée est pertinente dans un contexte, puis donnez-lui de la résonance par la suite par la culture. Puis des fois, c'est une question de qu'est-ce que je peux mettre alentour de mon idée pour la faire exploser par la culture. Que la culture puisse porter cette idée-là à l'extérieur des frontières. Mon troisième point, c'est break a rule. Ça, pour moi, c'est la chose la plus importante. Présentement, ici, on me dit de me tenir sur le petit tapis rouge. OK? Mais si je décide de sortir du tapis rouge, là, ça gêne les caméramans, parce que là, ils sont obligés de me suivre. Si, mettons, je viens m'asseoir ici, à côté de mon ami ici, automatiquement, on n'a pas la même conversation. On n'a pas la même présentation. Moi, je dis toujours à mes créatifs, peu importe ce que vous faites, vous devez briser quelque chose. Just break one rule. Regardez votre idée, regardez ce que vous faites, et puis dites, qu'est-ce qui arrive si je brise une chose? Lorsque Steve Jobs a inventé l'iPad, pourquoi il a décidé de le mettre blanc? Pourquoi il a décidé de mettre les écouteurs blancs? Tout le monde se promenait avec des écouteurs noirs. Mais lui a décidé de mettre des écouteurs blancs. Il a brisé une chose. Pourquoi, lorsqu'on rentre dans un hôtel, on est obligé d'avoir la porte d'entrée, on rentre, la réception, le concierge à côté? Pourquoi qu'on est obligé d'avoir ça? Pourquoi qu'on ne peut pas bâtir un hôtel complètement différemment? Regardez à tous les fois, lorsque vous travaillez dans un projet, peu importe la discipline, prenez le temps, arrêtez, dites-vous, qu'est-ce qu'on peut changer? Une chose qu'on peut changer. Est-ce qu'on peut changer la forme, la couleur, le contexte, le message? Des fois, c'est changer le message dans le contexte dans lequel on est. Des fois, c'est changer le format. Souvent, lorsqu'on consomme la publicité, on est habitué de voir des messages 30 secondes à la télé. Qu'est-ce qui arrive si on fait un documentaire? Qu'est-ce qui arrive si on fait un message de 5 secondes? Qu'est-ce qui arrive si on fait des messages de 2 secondes? Changer des choses comme ça fait toute la différence au monde. Mais souvent, on a peur de faire ça. Parce que la minute qu'on brise quelque chose, il y a quelqu'un à côté qui dit Non, tu n'as pas le droit de faire ça. Tu ne peux pas faire ça. Il y a des lois par rapport à ça. On n'a pas le droit de faire ça. Puis là, on revient dans la norme, puis on revient sur mon petit tapis rouge quand on fait ça. C'est important de sortir de sa zone de confort et de briser ces choses-là. Sinon, vous ne serez jamais différent. Votre idée ne sera pas différente. Lorsqu'on sort et on change une chose, non seulement notre idée devient différente, mais elle devient unique. Il y a plusieurs années, j'ai travaillé avec un metteur en scène, un créateur très important au Québec qui s'appelle Robert Lepage. Robert m'a montré comment changer la perception des choses des fois en réalisant une ou deux petites choses alentour. On avait travaillé sur un projet qui s'appelait le Moulin à l'image, des TEDxMcGill à Québec, pour célébrer les 400 ans de la ville de Québec. On aurait pu faire un spectacle, on aurait pu faire un film, on aurait pu faire une parade, un spectacle. Non, on a décidé de projeter un film sur des silos à grès, ce qui s'était jamais fait. Voir un film extérieur sur une grande surface architecturale. On avait brisé seulement une chose et ça fait toute la différence. Donc, rappelez-vous de ça, always break a rule. La quatrième, the art factor, qui d'après moi est la chose la plus importante si on veut faire quelque chose qui va rester parmi nous. Souvent, lorsqu'on travaille une idée, lorsqu'on travaille un produit, un projet, souvent on est pressé par le temps. Souvent, on a des contraintes technologiques. Souvent, des fois, on a des contraintes budgétaires et puis on ne pousse pas notre travail jusqu'au bout. Moi, je dis toujours à mes équipes, craft takes time. Il faut prendre le temps de bien faire les choses. Parce que les idées, c'est lorsqu'on amène ces idées-là à un niveau artistique que les idées demeurent, que la beauté rentre en ligne de compte. Lorsque vous voyez un spectacle, par exemple, un spectacle du Cirque du Soleil. Un spectacle du Cirque du Soleil, oui, c'est un spectacle circassien. Il y a une scène, il y a des gens. Mais qu'est-ce qui fait en sorte que la réputation du Cirque du Soleil a fait le tour du monde? C'est parce qu'il y a un art factor à l'intérieur. C'est qu'on a monté le niveau de l'expérience à un niveau artistique. Qu'est-ce qui fait que l'Expo 67 de Montréal, la biosphère, est devenue une icône? Parce qu'on a monté au niveau de l'art une structure architecturale. Tout ce qu'on fait, lorsqu'on pousse un petit peu plus dans la réalisation de la pièce, tout devient soudainement un niveau d'art, un niveau artistique, et lorsque ces choses-là atteignent ce niveau-là, tout devient pertinent. Les choses qu'on n'aime pas, on veut les tasser. Les idées qui ne sont pas belles, les idées qui ne sont pas inspirantes, on veut les tasser. Les idées qui n'ont pas changé notre société, on veut les tasser. Les idées qui ne sont pas pertinentes au quotidien, on veut les enlever parce que ça fait du bruit. Mais les bonnes idées, peu importe la discipline dans laquelle on fait, si on vient rajouter ces 4 points-là alentour, c'est là qu'on est capable de créer et changer le monde et faire des bonnes idées. Chez Sidley, on travaille constamment avec des idées dans le moment. On sert du data, on sert plein d'informations pour faire en sorte que nos idées soient meilleures. On bâtit des lieux, on bâtit des marques. Un jour, on va peut-être bâtir des voitures, j'espère. Mais pour moi, ce qui est important, c'est de passer au travers de ces 4 étapes-là pour faire en sorte que les idées aient du sens. Parce que si on crée des choses qui ne font pas la différence, ça ne vaut pas la peine de le faire. Souvent, il y a des gens qui viennent me voir avec des idées, puis je me dis, ça, c'est des fausses bonnes idées. C'est des idées qui vont juste alourdir les choses. Mais si on prend le temps de passer au travers de ces 4 points-là, on va faire en sorte que nos idées sont meilleures, nos produits, et tout ce qu'on fait est une expérience beaucoup plus grande qui fait la différence en bout de ligne. Donc, je vous laisse là-dessus. So, please guys, whatever you do, create what matters. Faites que ça soit beau, faites que ça soit pertinent et surtout différent. Merci et bonne soirée.
All right, thank you so much for that delightful talk en français. Right now we're going to watch another video from a TED Talk that took place just about a year ago. It was performed, or spoken rather, by Jennifer Bria, who is a woman who talks about what you do and what happens when you're living with a disease that doctors simply can't diagnose. Which for her was chronic fatigue syndrome. So during this talk, she's going to explain what her lived experience is like with chronic fatigue syndrome, and she's going to discuss how she gives voice to other patients who are living with a similar or the same syndrome themselves.
Hi. Thank you. So, 5 years ago, this was me. I was a PhD student at Harvard, and I loved to travel. I had just gotten engaged to marry the love of my life. I was 28, and like so many of us when we are in good health, I felt like I was invincible. Then one day I had a fever of 104.7 degrees. I probably should have gone to the doctor, but I'd never really been sick in my life. And I knew that usually if you have a virus, you stay home and you make some chicken soup, and in a few days everything will be fine. But this time it wasn't fine. After the fever broke, for 3 weeks I was so dizzy, I couldn't leave my house. I would walk straight into door frames. I had to hug the walls just to make it to the bathroom. That spring I got infection after infection, and every time I went to the doctor, he said there was absolutely nothing wrong. He had his laboratory tests, which always came back normal. All I had were my symptoms, which I could describe, but no one else can see. I know it sounds silly, but you have to find a way to explain things like this to yourself. And so I thought maybe I was just aging. Maybe this is what it's like to be on the other side of 25. Then the neurological symptoms started. Sometimes I would find that I couldn't draw the right side of a circle. Other times I wouldn't be able to speak or move at all. I saw every kind of specialist: infectious disease doctors, rheumatologists, endocrinologists, cardiologists. I even saw a psychiatrist. My psychiatrist said, "It's clear you're really sick, but not with anything psychiatric. I hope they can find out what's wrong with you." The next day, my neurologist diagnosed me with conversion disorder. He told me that everything, the fevers, the sore throats, the sinus infection, all the gastrointestinal, neurological, and cardiac symptoms were being caused by some distant emotional trauma that I could not remember. The symptoms were real, he said, but they had no biological cause. I was training to be a social scientist. I had studied statistics, probability theory, mathematical modeling, experimental design. I felt like I couldn't just reject my neurologist's diagnosis. It didn't feel true, but I knew from my training that the truth is often counterintuitive, so easily obscured by what we want to believe. And so I had to consider the possibility that he was right. That day, I ran a small experiment. I walked back the 2 miles from my neurologist's office to my house, my legs wrapped in this strange, almost electric kind of pain. I meditated on that pain, contemplating how my mind could have possibly generated all this. As soon as I walked through the door, I collapsed. My brain and my spinal cord were burning. My neck was so stiff, I couldn't touch my chin to my chest. And the slightest sound, the rustling of the sheets, my husband walking barefoot in the next room, could cause excruciating pain. I would spend most of the next 2 years in bed. How could my doctor have gotten it so wrong? I thought I had a rare disease, something doctors had never seen. And then I went online and found thousands of people all over the world living with the same symptoms, similarly isolated, similarly disbelieved. Some could still work, but had to spend their evenings and weekends in bed just so they could show up the next Monday. On the other end of the spectrum, some were so sick they had to live in complete darkness, unable to tolerate the sound of a human voice or the touch of a loved one. I was diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis. You've probably heard it called chronic fatigue syndrome. For decades, that's a name that's meant that this has been the dominant image of a disease that can be as serious as this. The key symptom we all share is that whenever we exert ourselves, physically, mentally, we pay, and we pay hard. If my husband goes for a run, he might be sore for a couple of days. If I try to walk half a block, I might be bedridden for a week. It is a perfect custom prison. I know ballet dancers who can't dance, accountants who can't add, medical students who never became doctors. It doesn't matter what you once were. You can't do it anymore. It's been 4 years, and I've still never been as well as I was the minute before I walked home from my neurologist's office. It's estimated that about 15 to 30 million people around the world have this disease. In the US, where I'm from, it's about 1 million people. That makes it roughly twice as common as multiple sclerosis. Patients can live for decades with the physical function of someone with congestive heart failure. 25% of us are homebound or bedridden, and 75 to 85% of us can't even work part-time. Yet doctors do not treat us, and science does not study us. How could a disease this common and this devastating have been forgotten by medicine? When my doctor diagnosed me with conversion disorder, he was evoking a lineage of ideas about women's bodies that are over 2,500 years old. The Roman physician Galen thought that hysteria was caused by sexual deprivation in particularly passionate women. The Greeks thought that the uterus would literally dry up and wander around the body in search of moisture, pressing on internal organs. Yes. Causing symptoms from extreme emotions to dizziness and paralysis. The cure was marriage and motherhood. These ideas went largely unchanged for several millennia until the 1880s, when neurologists tried to modernize the theory of hysteria. Sigmund Freud developed a theory that the unconscious mind could produce physical symptoms when dealing with memories or emotions too painful for the conscious mind to handle. It converted these emotions into physical symptoms. This meant that men could now get hysteria, but of course women were still the most susceptible. When I began investigating the history of my own disease, I was amazed to find how deep these ideas still run. In 1934, 198 doctors, nurses, and staff at the Los Angeles County General Hospital became seriously ill. They had muscle weakness, stiffness in the neck and back, fevers, all of the same symptoms I had when I first got diagnosed. Doctors thought that it was a new form of polio. Since then, there have been more than 70 outbreaks documented around the world of a strikingly similar post-infectious disease. All of these outbreaks have tended to disproportionately affect women. And in time, when doctors failed to find the one cause of the disease, they thought that these outbreaks were mass hysteria. Why has this idea had such staying power? I do think it has to do with sexism, but I also think that fundamentally, doctors want to help. They want to know the answer. And this category allows doctors to treat what would otherwise be untreatable, to explain illnesses that have no explanation. The problem is that this can cause real harm. In the 1950s, a psychiatrist named Elliot Slater studied a cohort of 85 patients who had been diagnosed with hysteria. 9 years later, 12 of them were dead, and 30 had become disabled. Many had undiagnosed conditions like multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, brain tumors. In 1980, hysteria was officially renamed conversion disorder. When my neurologist gave me that diagnosis in 2012, he was echoing Freud's words verbatim. And even today, women are 2 to 10 times more likely to receive that diagnosis. The problem with the theory of hysteria or psychogenic illness is that it can never be proven. It is by definition the absence of evidence. And in the case of ME, psychological explanations have held back biological research. All around the world, ME is one of the least funded diseases. So in the US, we spend each year roughly $2,500 per AIDS patient, $250 per MS patient, and just $5 per year per ME patient. This was not just lightning. I was not just unlucky. The ignorance surrounding my disease has been a choice made by the institutions that were supposed to protect us. We don't know why ME sometimes runs in families, why you can get it after almost any infection from enteroviruses to Epstein-Barr virus to Q fever, or why it affects women at 2 to 3 times the rate of men. This issue is much bigger than just my disease. When I first got sick, old friends started reaching out to me, and I soon found myself a part of a cohort of women in their late 20s whose bodies were falling apart. What was striking was just how much trouble we were having being taken seriously. I learned of one woman with scleroderma, an autoimmune connective tissue disease, who was told for years that it was all in her head. Between the time of onset and diagnosis, her esophagus was so thoroughly damaged, she'll never be able to eat again. Another woman with ovarian cancer, who for years was told that it was just early menopause. A friend from college whose brain tumor was misdiagnosed for years as anxiety. Here's why this worries me. Since the 1950s, rates of many autoimmune diseases have doubled to tripled. 45% of patients who are eventually diagnosed with a recognized autoimmune disease are initially told that they are hypochondriacs. Like the hysteria of old, this has everything to do with gender and with whose stories we believe. 75% of autoimmune disease patients are women, and in some diseases it's as high as 90%. Even though these diseases disproportionately affect women, they are not women's diseases. ME affects children, and ME affects millions of men. And as one patient told me, we get it coming and going. If you're a woman, you're told that you're exaggerating your symptoms. But if you're a guy, you're told to be strong, to buck up. And men may even have a more difficult time getting diagnosed. My brain is not what it used to be. Here's the good part. Despite everything, I still have hope. So many diseases were once thought of as psychological until science uncovered their biological mechanisms. Patients with epilepsy could be forcibly institutionalized until the EEG was able to measure abnormal electrical activity in the brain. Multiple sclerosis could be misdiagnosed as hysterical paralysis until the CAT scan and the MRI discovered brain lesions. And recently, we used to think that stomach ulcers were just caused by stress until we discovered that H. pylori was the culprit. ME has never benefited from the kind of science that other diseases have had, but that's starting to change. In Germany, scientists are starting to find evidence of autoimmunity, and in Japan, of brain inflammation. In the US, scientists at Stanford are finding abnormalities in energy metabolism that are 16 standard deviations away from normal. And in Norway, researchers are running a phase 3 clinical trial on a cancer drug that in some patients causes complete remission. What also gives me hope is the resilience of patients. Online, we came together and we shared our stories. We devoured what research there was. We experimented on ourselves. We became our own scientists and our own doctors because we had to be. And slowly I added 5% here, 5% there, until eventually, on a good day, I was able to leave my home. I still had to make ridiculous choices. Will I sit in the garden for 15 minutes, or will I wash my hair today? But it gave me hope that I could be treated. I had a sick body, that was all. And with the right kind of help, maybe one day I could get better. And I came together with patients around the world, and we started to fight. We have filled the void with something wonderful, but it is not enough. I still don't know if I will ever be able to run again, or walk at any distance, or do any of those kinetic things that I now only get to do in my dreams. But I am so grateful for how far I have come.